Hi there, welcome back to the Apatros Review. In this episode, Critters 3, directed by Christine Pearson in the year 1991. It was also Leonardo DiCaprio's first film. Hi there, welcome back to the Apatros Review. I'm your host, Mila Sipka, and join me as I'm taking a ride through the wild world of science fiction action horror, all from my personal DVD collection. A whole heap of DVDs, plus a few Blu-rays, videotapes, video games, and TV shows, and a few books, occasionally. Now in this episode we look at the film Critters 3, which was directed by Christine Pearson and was released as a direct-to-video feature in 1991. It was the first of two direct-to-video sequels, Critters, shot back-to-back and released in the early 90s. And that was it for that series until Critters Attack came out a few years ago. Now, the DVD was actually released, the film was released twice in Australia. The first was through Roadshow Entertainment, which is pretty much my review copy, and I'll explain a little bit more about that more later on. Also released through New Line Cinema, Warner Brothers. Now this is the third entry in the Critters series and the first of two direct-to-video sequels that finally spelled the end of this minor franchise, until its surprise re-emergence in the late 2010s of Critters Attack, that is. Shot back-to-back with the final sequel, Critters 4, Critters 3 is squarely aimed at the children's market, although with the mild gore and noticeable swearing witnessed here, this is a little bit suspect. Now, for the story, widowed railway worker Clifford, his teenage daughter Annie, and young son Johnny returning to their Topeka, Kansas apartment block home when their first vacation since the death of their wife and mother, and still they have a bit of a problem. Their greedy landlord, Briggs, who they never met before, is planning to demolish the building to make way for a mini mall, but is too tight-fisted to pay the tenants their relocation fee. And even though the court actually ordered him to pay them, but he has this idea that he can skip on paying them rent if he can force them to leave their homes voluntarily. So he's a bit of a shifty bugger. Now, to this end, he's hired a disreputable maintenance man, Frank Longo, to drive the tenants out by various underhanded means, including introducing rats into the building. In fact, one of the tenants actually leaves because there are rats there. As Briggs' tightness extends into paying his henchmen, and Longo proves to be a bit of a handful, the landlord decides to take his steps on Josh and heads down to the building to finally and forcefully evict his tenants. But a group of Krites, also known as Critters, have somehow found their way into the apartment building. Apparently they hitched a ride on Clifford's van, and are quickly attacking the tenants. As one of the old tenants is sent for help, he's called a dedicated critter hunter, Charlie McFadden. Apparently this guy has clippings of old tabloid alien stories, and has some connections in Grover's Bend, and he's pretty much called Charlie to come over. And in the meantime, as Longo falls into the Krite's gaping jaws, and Briggs attempts to sabotage the building's systems, causes a fire, the 7 surviving tenants try to escape the building through the roof, but the Critters seem to be on their heels. Now, the original Critters was a reasonable junk food popcorn muncher that did some good business on VHS shelves, and the first sequel was just a plain mess, thanks to the clumsy humor that director Mick Garris uses as his trademark. Critters 3 is not only a damn sight better than the previous entry, but the best of the sequels overall, until I review Critters Attack this, but of the classic sequels is pretty much the best. It's not exactly a good film in itself. The characterizations are simplistic and some of the characters are just plain annoying. Jeffrey Blake, who plays Frank Longo, is actually also how should I put it this way? He works in LGBT erotica, in gay adult movies, basically. He's just an irritating bastard of a villain, and in a scene that makes a mockery of the film's suitability for children, he makes an undisguised sexual pass at Catherine Cortez's telephone company technician tenant, Marcia. Basically tells her, "Hey, I'm having a phone problem. Can you come to my basement and, touching his groin, check on my equipment?" Of course, Marcia replies back with a good retort, but the film does kind of strange how something like that would appear in a kids' film. But then this is 1991. The film was actually rated in America PG-13. Here in Australia, it was just rated PG for medium-level violence. Strange. It's one of those rare films that you would find in the 90s that's actually a PG rating for something like medium-level violence. Independence Day was the other one. But the film does, once the lights in the building go out, gets better and ultimately makes for a passable lightweight genre film that will pretty much belly its status as a laughing stock. Now, what makes Critters 3 more of a trivia note than anything else is the presence of a young Leonardo DiCaprio, who would make his debut here and later become one of the biggest film stars of his generation. The future star of Inception is okay as the villainous landlord's honest stepson, who actually plays a hand in bringing down his stepdad's plans by accidentally leading him to the credits. As for the critters themselves, director Christine Pearson, whose credits also include the Kickboxer sequel The Redemption, a couple of years after this, gives him ample screen time, particularly an amusingly silly scene with the little creatures in the old tenant's kitchen burping bubbles after drinking washing detergent and farting after eating beans. At times, Critters 3 even resembles some sort of cartoon, with such images as Catherine Cortez getting stuck on a cable after falling off the building, hanging upside down and only a foot off the ground. Cortez tries to swing her way to the nearest telephone booth to call for help, but doesn't quite reach it. Only in the end. The film is nothing particularly special and is pretty much a disposable direct-to-video horror fodder for younger viewers, but for Critters fans it is a passable time waster. There are plenty of critics who thought this film was a laughing stock, but in some ways it is. But to be honest, it's kind of enjoyable, passable in a way. Now the critics actually get more screen time than before since, with the 2/3 of the film dedicated to them. Plus they tend to look too cute to be actually scary, or for the ways that they finally meet their maker cartoonishly silly. One gets turned into an improvised firework, and there's even a rejig of the original's critic eats a firecracker kill that ends up setting the building on fire. With some noticeable swearing and sexual references on display here, it's clear from the film that the producers don't seem to have a firm grasp on what constitutes clean family humor. Plus, Jeffrey Blake's bread and butter erotica features will make many parents think twice about letting the kids see this film if they discover this. Even though he doesn't, aside from that sexual reference, he doesn't really do anything dirty in this film, in a way. Now, Terrence Mann appears at the very end of the film as fellow bounty hunter Ugg, but his scene is brief and is rejigged in Critters 4, both versions of the scene are different, slightly mainly in dialogue in the after-credits scene. Having said that, the idea of putting Mann at the very end instead of having him take a more substantial role in the film seems to be just to include him in filler material that makes this film a clear link to the next and final sequel. Now, for the gore. There's no human gore aside from some bloody bite marks on Longo's body, but the critters do get killed in various bloody ways, showing their stinking green innards on display. And as for nudity, nothing like that here, although the film features some noticeably adult humor at times. For a PG rating film, this is somewhat borderline unacceptable, in a way, borderline sort of. Now Critters 3 gets a C+, 5 out of 10. This ranks it as a passable film, almost perfect for young ones, although the adult stuff does kind of raise the proverbial eyebrow. Now for the DVD. This was released onto Region 4 DVD twice, first for Roadshow Entertainment, which is what my review copy is, I lost the cover a long time ago, and the second time for New Line Entertainment as part of the distribution deal with Warner Home Video. The Roadshow disc has a pretty good looking 185 anamorphic frame that looks good, although this could be either cropped from the VHS print's 1:33 ratio, or the VHS print was the cropped one. I can't say for certain. Anyway, the picture has no real issues to report, but the print does show its age in certain rare moments, a little bit of grain. The soundtrack comes in two options: the original English stereo or a nicely remixed 5:1 track that gives the sound effects a little bit more oomph, and both sound fine. There are English subtitles and captions, and it only supplements the film's trailer, which looks like it would have featured on VHS tapes at the time. Okay, that was it for Critters 3. Like I said, C+. And if you can find that Roadshow disc, it was released as a box set, but also separately. Also, the Roadshow disc was released for real DVD, but in the same disc, but just repackaged, and then through New Line Home Video. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Now, I've only got a handful more reviews left to go before the end of the year. I'll do a couple of special episodes at the end of the year just to fill things out. Hope you guys are staying safe. Take care, and that's it for this review.